What's up, YouTube? My name is Jared, and today I'm bringing you the first episode of a show I'm really excited to start called Legendary Character Design. Legendary Character Design is going to be a show where I take a figure from history, discuss what makes them legendary, and boil them down to a few core traits. Then I use those traits to springboard off of and create an original character based on them. The idea for this show was born from my love of both history and art, so I hope it's fun for you as well. Let's get started. My first subject for study on the show comes courtesy of the show's first patron, Justin, who suggested Alexander of Macedonia, or as you probably know him, Alexander the Great. Alexander was king of Macedonia in Greece in the 3rd century BC. He ascended the throne at 20 and waged an unprecedented military campaign through Asia and North Africa, and by age 30 had an empire that stretched from Greece to Egypt to India to Pakistan. He was undefeated in battle and is well remembered for encouraging the pre-existing cultures to thrive under his rule, creating a multinational and multicultural empire. Alex's dad, King Philip II, had quite a few wives, but Alex's mother, Olympias, was special. When Alex was conceived, she had this dream that her womb was struck by lightning, and then out of her womb a wildfire spread wide and far across the land. Mystics say that this indicated Alex's true father was Zeus, and like that wildfire, his empire would spread across the lands. Alexander was tutored by Aristotle until 16 when he joined his father in war campaigns. Together they united Greece under the Hellenic Alliance, which included everybody except Sparta. However, soon after this, Philip was murdered by the captain of his very own bodyguards, who was immediately murdered in return, leaving Alexander the king at age 20. His first act was securing his throne from rivals, so he had many of his half-siblings and cousins executed, and his mother even had some of his sisters buried alive. After securing his throne, many great scholars and philosophers came to Alexander to offer their congratulations. Except one, Diogenes the Cynic, also known as Diogenes the Dog. So Alexander goes to him and finds him laying in the sun, and the great monarch addresses Diogenes and asks if there's anything in the world he can do for him. And Diogenes rolls over and replies, "Yes, can you move a little bit? You're blocking my sun." Alexander was so taken with the response and the complete disregard for his status that he just laughs and he says, "Surely, if I were not already Alexander, I would like to be Diogenes." It's at this point Alex decides he should conquer the world. So he goes to the borders of Asia and he thrusts a spear into the soil and he declares that he accepts Asia as a gift from the gods. He starts conquering and he claims territories down the coast, and then he turns inland, where he reaches the capital city of Gordium. In Gordium, there's this knot that is supposedly unsolvable, and they believe that one day a strange man will come into their lands and solve this knot, be able to untie this knot, and he will be their new ruler. So when Alexander arrives in Gordium, he's presented with this unsolvable knot. And he simply hacks it in half, and then he accepts Gordium under his rule and continues on his way. So now Alexander is making his way toward Egypt. Most of the cities he comes across surrender upon his arrival, and he agrees to let them sort of keep on keeping on as long as they swear fealty to him. But then he reaches Gaza. Gaza is heavily fortified, it's built on a hill, and his engineers suggested that sieging is gonna be impossible. This place is just too well defended. So Alexander simply does the impossible. 3 or 4 sieges and countless deaths later, Gaza falls. And after Gaza falls, Alexander is largely seen as a liberator to Egypt, and they proclaim that he's the son of their god Amun, giving him double divine lineage points. And for those keeping score, Alexander now has 2 divine fathers, which is 1 more divine father than most prophets have. Currency depicting Alexander shows him with ram's horns to show his divine lineage. He also founds Alexandria in Egypt, and in fact, founding new cities named Alexandria is pretty much his second favorite pastime, right after conquering cities that probably should have been named Alexandria in the first place. Alexander's conquest only ends when, stretched far and thin into India, his troops kinda give up. They argue that they had conquered and marched for Alexander for a decade, and they were tired, and they missed their families, and their feet hurt. And Alexander eventually agrees, and they sort of turn around and go back home. And that was that! Soon after, Alexander took ill. Possibly from a slow-acting poison, as indirectly murdered is second only to directly murdered for how kings meet their end, but slow-acting poisons are very rare and mostly unknown at this time. So the prevailing theory is that he just partied too hard. His best friend had died, he was very depressed, and he sort of drowned himself in these wild parties. The idea is that his body just couldn't handle it anymore and sort of quit. He would die just short of 2 weeks after first getting sick, and as he lay dying, his soldiers asked to whom he would leave his kingdom, and he had no obvious sons or anything, so he replies, "To the strongest." Predictably, after he died, his empire pretty much crumbled, as it was now full of people trying to prove that they were the strongest. But an interesting note about his death is that he left a will that listed, aside from the obvious, "please conquer more and please build awesome monuments," had a clause that says, "please develop cities and transplant populations from Asia to Europe and Europe to Asia and bring the whole continent to common unity and friendship." So it was kind of cool that he really celebrated these multiple cultures and wanted to blend them and mix them and make everybody sort of friends, as long as they were friends that worshipped him as king. One last amusing tale is the tale of Alexander and the diving bell. Alexander was supposedly one of the first people to use a diving bell, which is basically like this big glass barrel and kind of like a primitive submarine. You could be lowered down into the water and spy on fish as they do fish things. Alexander supposedly had his favorite mistress in charge of lowering him down into the water and raising him up, but she became enamored with one of the other men on board and sort of just threw the chain over altogether, leaving Alexander to figure out how to escape from the bottom of the ocean in a big glass barrel. However, none of my research offered a solution for how he got out of this predicament, so I'm left to conjecture that Alexander simply sat there until the ocean agreed to be conquered by him, and then he willed the sea life to push him ashore. I believe Alexander the Great was also the first Aquaman. So that's Alexander the Great, and at this point, we look back and we think about what makes Alexander the Great. What are the key traits about Alexander, and the first thing that comes to mind is cockiness. When he's presented with an impossible task, he says, "I will simply do the impossible," and how cocky is it to be age 20, newly crowned king, and you're like, "No, I'm gonna conquer the world. This isn't enough territory for me, I want more." Another thing I like is the spear, or I believe it's called a sarissa, the long Greek spears that they used in phalanxes, that he thrusts into the ground and says, "I accept this land as a gift from the gods," just assuming that it's meant for him. That's a great part of his character. As far as clothing, let's see if we can mix Greek and Persian. One of the main criticisms of Alexander the Great is that as he conquered more and more of Persian territories, he starts adopting their culture and their customs and their clothing, and his Greek followers sort of panned that and felt that he was kind of betraying his heritage and not quite Greek or Hellenic enough for them. He was becoming more Persian in their eyes. He was very young, so our character's going to have to be young. Let's give him the ram's horns. I like that idea, to denote his divine heritage. And maybe we can actually use the symbols of the two gods. Zeus, we can use lightning bolts, and Ammon is often associated with the sun. So we can do that. And actually, Alexander, a lot of sources claim that Alexander had heterochromia, which, if you don't know, is two different colored eyes. So he has two different colored eyes. He's the son of two of the major gods in two of the major polytheistic religions. He's undefeatable in battle. He's basically a real-life Mary Sue character. Somebody's original character. Do not steal. And that's Alexander. So, let's get a rough sketch going. Zoom out a little bit, not that far. Let's, we want to work on the cockiness, so we'll kind of give him this sort of attitudinal stance. We'll give him a lot of curves. We'll puff out his chest, and we'll bring back his hips. So we'll have this sort of like his head's going this way, his torso's going this way, and then it lightning bolts back for his legs. let's give him, let's put the spear in this hand. So he's got this long Greek spear here. Put the other hand on his hip, of course, to, you know, show that he's sure of himself, and, we have to give him that fantastic hair. As for clothes, let's, I've got this sort of idea of Greek where it was like shoulder pauldrons and some chest armor and the little flappy things that I don't know the proper term for, the kind of the skirt. And Persian clothing was a lot of robes and belts and very Final Fantasy kind of inspired. Or rather, Final Fantasy is very Persian-inspired in my mind. Lots of robes and cloaks and capes and belts and stuff. So, let's give him kind of half and half. Let's do a belt. Maybe we can have sort of a sun and a lightning bolt symbol for his divine heritage, and some robes down here, and maybe like a shawl or a cape or a cloak up here, and then the Greek armor underneath it, like this. Now he kind of looks like a wizard. I'm okay with that. He might have been a wizard. Maybe that's how he was undefeatable in battle. He was actually a wizard. And ooh, we can give him one of those neat sort of Persian hats. They're kind of rectangular, like this. Look like a bucket, maybe? No, he definitely looks like a wizard, though. Yeah, I'm fine with that. And so this is our sketch, and what I'll do is I'll cut and sort of speed up the rendering process, and then meet you back whenever I'm finished to discuss any changes I made or design decisions I've made, and then we'll wrap it up. So here it is. This is the finished character that I created based off of the qualities of Alexander the Great. I've named him Zandamandius. He's a great conqueror slash wizard. I noticed about halfway through drawing this guy that I was getting really heavy into the Persian sort of style of garments. Originally I had this idea to sort of put the Greek armor on and then Persian robes over it, but the Greek was getting lost in all the Persian, which is actually kind of funny because it mirrors what happened with Alexander the Great. So I added these, and I have no idea what they're called, these like gladiator skirts sort of elements over his front here, and then just for unity's sake onto his shoulder pauldron as well. The color scheme I used, I picked warm colors associated with the lightning and the sun, and then for contrast I picked a cold steely blue, and then I pulled a dark blue just in case I needed it, and I ended up being pretty glad I used it on these sort of diagonal wraps here to help guide your eye through the figure. If you notice, I went back and made his hat sort of mirror his skirt down here for the same reason, just to add unity. And so it's important to me to have elements repeated throughout the character design to help tie it all together and make it look like one full character design instead of a mess of different designs mashed together and called a character. So, do I think it's a successful character design? I do. I think it's a little busy, and when something is busy and I want to be nice about it, I say it looks opulent. And in this case, I think opulence sort of works for Alexander the Great. I tried to keep things as simple as possible. That's my animation background coming out in me. I use a lot of simple shapes and simplified lines and curves whenever I draw. That's a holdover from being raised on Western-style cartoons and my animation education. I just went with flat colors for now because this is my first episode. I wasn't sure exactly how long this is going to take. I'm not sure currently how long the video is going to be total, so I didn't want, an hour-long video of me shading and coloring and all this other mess. I think the flats here get the point across, and it looks fun! This is Zandamandius. This has been Legendary Character Design, Episode 1. If you would, pop that like button down below you, subscribe. This is a brand new show, brand new channel, so it makes me really happy, and it makes me want to bring you guys more of these. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have any suggestions or criticisms, let me know those too, and I hope you guys have a great day.